Welcome to Full Speed Ahead. I'm Craig Fuller, here with a special guest from Holland. Stan is the Senior Manager of Supply Chain Solutions at the Holland International Distribution Council. That is a big name and big responsibility.
It is.
So Stan, what is it that the HIDC does?
The HIDC is a council based in the Netherlands, and we represent and promote the Dutch logistics industry. So we've been established over 30 years ago, when more and more products were coming from overseas into Europe. And these companies that were manufacturing overseas, they were looking into where is the best place for us to get into Europe. And the Netherlands is for obvious reasons, a great location, as it's very central. It had a big port. So they thought this is a huge opportunity. We have to have an organization that goes abroad, helps companies settle down in Europe, in the Netherlands specifically, with their logistics operations. So we represent about 300 companies right now. Half of them are logistics service providers. A lot of them you must know. Actually, a lot of them are from the US. So UPS, FedEx, XPO, C.H. Robinson, Expeditors. They all have major facilities in the Netherlands, and they use it as a gateway as well for their clients.
A trade association?
You could say it's a trade association.
Chamber of Commerce of sorts?
Sort of, yeah. So we really focus on that transatlantic link between US companies and the Dutch logistics industry. And we promote, but we also do matchmaking. So when I talk to a company that wants to get into Europe, so sell the products there, then we go and find the best partner for them. And sometimes they want to have their own warehouse. We can help with that as well. So really, we are a broker between different sides, if you will. And we try to find that right match and make sure that the US company has a good setup for the European market in the Netherlands.
Now, Netherlands is a major logistics hub of Europe. The Port of Rotterdam is there. I got the opportunity to tour Floral Holland, which I was just, my wife, she insisted on this going through the tour, but the amount of flowers that go through that particular location was astounding.
It is, and it still is. It's the largest flower hub in the world, and what you see going in there daily, early in the morning, of course, and going out there, it's just amazing, and it's like an ant's nest, you know. It's so dynamic what's going on there every day, and recently they obviously had their big peak with Valentine's Day, and it's just amazing how much gets in there from all over the world, from Africa, from South America, every day. And then trucked out to the whole continent, and even flown out back here to the US.
It was interesting because it was a financial markets in one sense of the word, because they're trading flowers, different type of flowers, and it was a logistics. You know, ultimately they thought of themselves as a logistics operation more so than a trading operation. But I was enamored with the fact that it was sort of the intersection of both of those.
Definitely, and the Netherlands have been trading for hundreds of years. It's basically our bread and butter. I mean, we do have some manufacturing, but more than 10% of our workforce is in logistics. More than 10% of our GDP is in logistics. So for us, it's a huge economic pillar. And we're really working on making sure that things like the flower trade is done as smoothly as possible. And the same goes for medical devices and pharmaceuticals. In a sense, it's a little bit the same, of course, as flowers, because you have to track and trace quite carefully. Often it's refrigerated. It's very time critical. So that experience that we had in the flower business, we're really using that for other businesses as well.
Is that where the logistics focus started? Is that why it started? Because of the flower business?
It actually started earlier than that. So the first multinational company in the world is the East Indian Trading Company. And it brought herbs and spices from all over the world to the Netherlands.
You know a little bit American history. It's part of a folklore of American history. So
Right. Well, there you go. And it's what we've been doing since. So the first stock exchange in the world was in Amsterdam as well. It's just something, trading is in our blood. And we try to keep it on that level still nowadays. I mean, you need to have a very stable and facilitating environment to make sure these flows keep continuing, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of disruption in supply chains, so companies are really looking at that stable factor where they can rely on things to keep moving. So that's what we're focusing on.
Now, a lot of conversation about Brexit. Yeah. And the impact to EU. One of the things when I was at Floral Holland a couple years ago, Brexit had been decided or voted on by the British voters, but there was still a lot of angst on whether it would happen. It was in the period where there was a lot of uncertainty. Yeah. It has happened.
It has
taken place.
You wouldn't say because it was fairly silent.
Yeah. So what is the concern was what would happen to the flower markets, particularly as it related to the British market. What has been the impact of that in terms of trade with continental Europe?
Well, so far, not really, because after Brexit happened very recently, only 3 weeks ago, there was a transition period. And in this transition period, it takes until the end of 2020, nothing changes, basically. The only thing we know is that Brexit will have its effect after the transition period. To what extent is uncertain, so there's about 9 to 10 months of heavy negotiations. And Boris Johnson, he said it's not going to take any longer than that, so no extension this time, which means they have to work out some type of trade agreement between both blocs. And the ideal situation would be that it would be something like the Canada-European trade agreement, CETA. They've negotiated on that for 7 years, and it was a lot less complicated because Canada is, across the Atlantic,
right?
And the UK is only across the Channel. So there's a lot of things that need to be negotiated, and we see there's a huge risk that there's still going to be some sort of a hard cliff edge type of Brexit at the end of this year.
Does this help logistics companies? Does it make their job more important in the role of understanding, interpreting, and dealing with this uncertainty? Or, there's the negative side effect of having to change supply chains and deal with disruptions and perhaps economic impacts. But in some respects, it creates a whole new economic opportunity. I would imagine that there's some opportunities that have emerged because of Brexit.
Absolutely. So, first, I want to start by saying it's going to have very bad effects for the Dutch economy, for the European economy, and of course for the UK economy in a broader sense, because global trade is a driver for economy, and when you have these things happening, it's going to hurt us all. Having said that, of course, for the Dutch logistics industry, it's also a very interesting opportunity. So what we've seen in the last 2 years is companies taking the decision to move their European stock from the UK to the Netherlands, or at least taking the part that is not destined for the UK. So a lot of US companies and also Japanese and Canadian companies, they started their European business in the UK because there's a language proximity, right, and a cultural proximity. And now, doing their research, finding out that when there's a border between the UK and the EU that's going to disrupt their distribution, they've decided to move that. So we've seen a warehouse boom, really, in the Netherlands. Millions and millions of square meters, so tens of millions of square feet, additional warehouse space has been built, and a lot of it is already full.
And this is there's been a lot of warehouse in the U.S. as well because of the impact of Amazon.
Yeah.
Is this an exceptionally big growth that's bigger than the rest of Europe because of Brexit?
I would think so. So of course have been in economic good times, and the e-commerce boom of course helps as well. But we are quite sure that Brexit has had a very positive effect on the logistics needs that there are for shippers. And as you asked about logistics companies, definitely they're profiting from this, especially the ones that have plans in place, so they can talk to the shippers and help them with contingency plans. The consultancy industry has been a big winner, of course. And it's definitely short term, so there's been stacking, piling of stock on both sides. But for the long term, I think the footprint of overseas companies in Europe has changed for the long term. So UK will not be a European distribution center location anymore, where it was actually. But when you're outside of the EU 27 common market, that doesn't really work.
Yeah, it's also financial. The financial, London has been historically viewed as the world's financial center. It's London, New York, and Singapore. Hong Kong, it shifted from Hong Kong to Singapore over the last decade.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to whether London holds on to their, as the world's financial center, whether it holds on to that or not. It's going to be interesting to see how things shake out, whether it takes a positive direction over time or negative. Certainly, closing off your number one trading partner and putting restrictions, it does not help.
No, and we've seen especially financial companies and broadcasting companies making their move because of Brexit, because of the rights that they have. You have to have your facility inside the European market.
They're moving to Netherlands specifically? Or just into continental Europe?
It's gone to the Netherlands, to France, to Germany mostly.
Got it.
And we've had some big wins, if you will. So the European Medicine Agency, for example, came from London to Amsterdam. And following that, we get a lot of medical device, pharmaceutical companies setting up their facility because they want to be close to that EMA. Same for broadcasting companies. They really like the cultural and the vibe that Amsterdam has. So they moved their operations to Amsterdam. They needed to move quickly because they need time to get their licenses in place. For logistics, it's a little bit a different story. So yes, we have seen the move, but I think we've only seen the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. So the bulk is still coming. They have their plans, and as soon as there's certainty, they're going to move their
They're also
stuff.
going to respond to freight demand. They're going to wait until there's demand before they build physical infrastructure. IMO 2020 is getting a lot of conversation. It had a lot of conversation 6 months ago because of the impact of oil, particularly what's happened in China. We haven't seen this massive run in oil prices, which has not created a massive run in fuels. I'm curious, what are your customers or your partners talking about? What are they thinking about as it relates to IMO 2020?
So for 2020, I think what's top of mind for 3PLs, for logistics companies, which are mostly in our member base, is what potential trade wars could have for impact. So there's progress between US and China. So what will happen with Europe when that's finalized? Maybe at some point it might be finalized. Will then Europe be targeted? Of course, there's
by Donald Trump.
By the US, there's a trade imbalance. So there's of course a lot of competition between the automotive industries on both sides. A lot of exports from Europe to the US, and that might be targeted at some point, and that's going to really impact trade flows, of course. So the trade flows that we see in the Netherlands, a lot of it is from Asia. So currently the coronavirus is really putting a damper on those flows. So there's no direct flights between Amsterdam Airport and a lot of European airports to China anymore. So those supply chains are disrupted, same as here. And the same will go for the Port of Rotterdam. China is the main trading partner for the Port of Rotterdam. So they will see down the line in this year some really heavy effects on that as well. Yeah,
the Chinese factories are shut down. You talked about automotive being having a big presence in Europe, particularly around trade. The auto manufacturers and the suppliers are shut down in China. So there's both the assembly of products where they're importing automotive parts, as well as the exporting after to the European auto manufacturers. Is having a pretty big impact.
Yeah, and I think the Netherlands is particularly vulnerable because about 80% of our logistics industry is focused on European distribution. So final products or semi-manufactured products that come from overseas to the other European markets. It's basically because we have that big port and because we have the big economies right around us. So we have Germany in the east, we have the UK in the west, and we have France in the south. We're right in the middle. And when the inbound dries up, then there's a lot less work for us.
Yeah.
That's I think the main concern now, and it's only been a couple of weeks that we've been talking about the coronavirus, but that's really our main concern now.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. Certainly a big story, a big impact on just society overall, particularly in China, as they deal with this. The question is, the lack of transparency is always a concern because you actually don't know whether the virus is being contained or it's very, the information leaks are very difficult because you can't get transparency to it. So
and we get probably the same information, right?
Well, the Chinese government is not a transparent government, and so it's very difficult because you really don't know what's actually happening.
It is. Some say that the number of infections could be tenfold what they report. So that could be worrying. What we know is that in the Netherlands we haven't had one single infection yet. We have it in our neighboring countries, but it's probably a matter of time. And we're just watching the news closely. Some say it's already declining. So that will be great news. So we can focus on other things again, on Brexit, for example. But let's see what happens.
Yeah, the Port of Rotterdam, I got to tour it. It's it's not fully automated. It was interesting because they've created inside the gate or the fence full automation. And in fact, the gentleman who gave me the tour described that if you went behind the fence, that the trucks that were in there would not know I was there and they would run me over. They just don't have any concept of it because it's a closed loop.
So did you try it or?
No, I did not try to jump the fence. I didn't think that was, my wife would not have appreciated that.
No.
Maybe she would have some days, but not that day. I'm curious, there was a conversation about a lot of tension a lot of concern when they first made an automated port. What has been the resolution of that? Is there now a lot of comfort with the automation that's taking place and the level of automation, or?
Well, I guess we're one of the pioneers in that field. So we've had it for quite a while, and it was an interesting project. But we did it in several steps. So we started with the automated guided vehicles, drive-by-wire. Now we wouldn't say it's very high tech, but for the day it was incredible, and it really helped making it more efficient. I don't think there was a lot of concern in terms of loss of jobs, for example, because there were plenty of jobs in the port, in the whole port complex. It supports hundreds of thousands of jobs. So it was just a way to make things more efficient, and we have a limited space, so making sure it is really efficient is top priority. So the newest terminals, they are even more automated. So there won't be anyone on the whole terminal. You just have this control room where a couple of guys are looking at the screen, seeing if everything's working okay. And it's the only way to get those largest vessels in and out as quickly as they do. I mean, it's 24,000 TEUs that you need to do in
massive.
Yeah. So you have to get that in and out super quickly. Have to get it on the barges. We use barges to get it inland. So it's a different setup than you would see here, and it's really working. So if you look at the efficiency of the port, it's really top notch.
Yeah, the amount of freight that moves on barges versus the U.S. is a lot of container on barges, which was really interesting to see. What is top of mind for your visit here in the United States? What is the goal of you coming to the U.S. and building the bridges?
Yeah, so this time around, I'll be heading to Florida after this and meeting with exporting companies that are either new to Europe and need to be educated on how it works, how does importing work, what are the preferences of your European customers and how can you meet those, what's a sensible logistics setup, how does the value-added tax work that we have in Europe, which is a bit of a beast. So those companies, they have a lot of questions when they start operations in Europe or optimize that. So that's what I do. I speak to those companies and hopefully I can help them with a logistics solution in the Netherlands. So in the end, I hope to come back home with a couple of companies that I can match in our council. So we get more business out of it, and those companies are helped as well. So we work a lot with non-profit type of organizations here, trade promotion, the Department of Commerce in the US. They all know which companies are making that move or are growing in Europe and want to be more efficient, and we can help them with their supply chain questions so they can focus on sales, marketing, everything else that they're really good at. Supply chain and logistics, we feel should be left to the specialists, and especially because Europe is so different from the US.
Yeah, especially with everything going on, whether it's trade policy, Brexit, the impact of the coronavirus, all of this is a big top of mind. You need logistics professionals that understand it, and you can bridge the gap and bring them into the folks that understand these particular issues that are taking place.
Exactly. I only know so much, and there are so many different types of products, right? So the medical device supply chain is completely different from the cut flower or agri-food or consumer electronics. But in our council, and that's exactly what I and my colleagues, we are only with 10 people. But our council is 300 companies. So there's a wealth of knowledge and capabilities in that council. And we really are that man in between to make those right connections.
Well, Stan, thank you for coming on today. Really appreciate you coming to Chattanooga, direct from Holland. Check us out on social media. Be sure to subscribe and like FreightWaves.com. as well as get our TV app. It's on the Apple Store, it's on the Android Play Store, as well as on Apple TV. You can also watch FreightWaves TV directly on FreightWaves.com. Be sure to tune in daily to our live stream. Also, don't forget that FreightWaves Live is coming up in Atlanta on May 5th and 6th. It is the Freight Tech Party of the Year. Get your tickets if you don't have them already.